When you think of a flamethrower, you probably imagine a modern weapon, a terrifying instrument used in 20th century warfare. But what if I told you that a primitive version of this weapon existed over 1,000 years ago? It's not an exaggeration. In the middle of the ancient age, long before gunpowder was known in Europe, there was already a civilization that had developed a weapon capable of launching fire in a controlled manner, under pressure, and with devastating results. A fire that could not be extinguished with water. A fire that clung to skin, to boats, to everything it touched. A fire that sowed terror among the enemies of the Byzantine Empire. The chroniclers of the time described it as an almost supernatural force. And those who confronted it saw it as magic or divine punishment. How did they do it? Who invented it? And why did this technology disappear from the map for centuries? Today we are going to talk about Greek fire, the secret weapon that turned the Byzantine Empire into an unstoppable military power. And that forces us to rethink how backward the ancient world really was. Fire has always been a symbol of power, destruction, and fear. Since the origins of war, civilizations understood that fire was not only useful for cooking or heating, it could also kill. The Egyptians burned fortresses. The Assyrians used torches in sieges. The Greeks launched incendiary projectiles with catapults. And the Romans would dip arrows in pitch or oil to set them on fire before shooting them. But all these methods had one thing in common: they were momentary fire. An impact, a flash of flame, and then it was out. What distinguishes the weapon we will see in this video is not only that it throws fire, but rather projected it in a continuous, directed jet, as if it were an infernal hose. It was not a simple lit torch. It was pressurized fire. Directed. Unstoppable. A concept so advanced that, if it weren't documented by several sources, it would seem like science fiction. Thus we come to the true protagonist of this story. A weapon born in the shipyards of the Byzantine Empire, which forever changed the rules of naval combat. In the 7th century, enemies of the Byzantine Empire began to face something they could not explain. During naval battles, a fiery jet of water would erupt from Byzantine ships, which not only set fire to, it continued to burn even on the water. It was the dreaded Greek fire, a secret weapon that made the Byzantine navy an invincible force for centuries. Witnesses describe it as a viscous fire, which clung to candles, wood, and the human body. And that could not be extinguished even with water. On the contrary, the water made it more ferocious. Many believed it was magic, or the fury of the gods. But it was chemistry. And it was technology. Its invention is attributed to an engineer named Callinicus of Heliopolis, who supposedly fled from the Arab advance and offered his knowledge to the Byzantines. Since then, Greek fire has been kept as a state secret. So confidential that even within the empire itself, only certain artisans and officials knew how to make or use it. And it worked. Thanks to this weapon, Constantinople withstood several sieges, including some from much larger armies. A single burst of Greek fire could turn an enemy fleet into a fiery trap with no way out. It was not just a tool of war. He was a living legend who inspired respect and terror. The most thing about Greek fire is not just what it did, but how they did it. Unlike other incendiary methods of the time, Greek fire was not launched in flasks or arrows. It was projected. And to do that, the Byzantines designed a system that essentially worked like a flamethrower. How was it possible? They used bronze tubes connected to sealed tanks with the flammable mixture. Using a system of hand pumps or pressure bellows, the liquid was forcefully expelled through the tube. At the tip, a lit wick or controlled spark turned it into a directed flare. This mechanism could be mounted on ships, defensive towers, and, according to some sources, even on handheld devices operated by soldiers. The fire came out like a burning tongue, controlled by the pressure exerted on the bellows. It was a short-range weapon, yes, but under the right conditions, devastating. The precision of the system suggests an advanced level of engineering, an empirical understanding of pressure, combustion, and materials. It is no exaggeration to say that the Byzantines, over 1,000 years ago, had created a functional firearm without gunpowder. And they didn't just create it, they mastered it. The great enigmas of military history is this. What exactly did Greek fire contain? Over the centuries, many have tried to discover its composition, but the truth is that the formula was lost, and not by accident. The Byzantine Empire protected it so zealously that it did not even leave detailed written records. Only a few knew her, and when they died, they took her with them. Why so much secrecy? Because this weapon was his most powerful advantage. And if it fell into enemy hands, it could turn against them. Still, there are clues. Modern theories, based on ancient texts and scientific experiments, suggest that the mixture included crude petroleum or naphtha as a flammable liquid base, pine resin, which helped the fire to stick, sulfur and quicklime to increase the temperature and reaction, and possibly saltpeter or even white phosphorus, although this is more disputed. The result was a highly flammable, sticky, and extremely difficult to extinguish compound. Was on, there was no turning back. Greek fire was so feared that, even centuries after its disappearance, it was spoken of with respect and fear. And the most impressive thing is that, even today, there is no exact recreation of the original. It is one of the few cases in history where a war technology became literally unrecoverable. A weapon ahead of its time, wrapped in flames and mystery. We tend to imagine the past as a time of ignorance, superstition, and primitive technology. But the story of Greek fire forces us to break that image. Over 1,000 years ago, a civilization developed a weapon so effective, so advanced for its time, that even we, with all our modern science, have not been able to reproduce it exactly. A functional flamethrower in the Middle Ages. And they used it not only to conquer, but to resist and survive. Thanks to Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire repelled attacks that would have destroyed any other city. It wasn't magic. It was chemistry. It was engineering. It was well-kept knowledge that the world forgot. We are left with the inevitable question. How many other technologies were lost in time? And how many things do we think are modern that were actually invented centuries ago? Because if the past could create something so destructive and sophisticated without electricity, without gunpowder, without modern science, what else were they capable of?